this is a topic that is especially important to me professionally because I'm a music therapist. I was doing music therapy for 10 years in hospitals and clinics and with kids and teaching music before I got into doing psychotherapy and all this other kind of stuff. So in our training as music therapists, we learned about listening, and we learned about the ear and the brain and how sound, the sensory power of sound, and the way our brains are organized around listening and hearing. So there's something very fundamental about hearing and listening as of all of our five senses, and music is maybe the best expression of the way of listening, of hearing, because we can't, as you know, if you're on the dance floor, the music changes, so does your body. Your body moves in an entirely different way when the music changes, and that's not really a conscious process. That's how it feels. It feels right, and it's because our bodies respond in this very emotional, automatic, immediate way to sound, and particularly to music. So we're going to go into that a little bit about why that is and how that influences relationships and the art of listening as opposed to just hearing, you know, where these automatic responses are happening. And I want to begin with a story that, for two reasons, is significant for us. I'll tell you the story, and then I think the significance will reveal itself. I don't think I need to explain all that, but there's one thing that I will say about the main character in this story. So there's a playwright named Jerome Weidman. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright. He wrote I Can Get It For You Wholesale. He got a Pulitzer Prize for Fiorello, writing the book for that musical. So back in the day, when he was a very, very big in the arts in New York, he was invited to a dinner party in New York City with a lot of other luminaries, and he was happy to go. He's a bit of an introvert, but he likes these kinds of parties. He arrives, and he sees, with a little bit of dread, he sees there are musical instruments in the room with the dinner guests, and that this is not only a dinner party, it's also a concert. Now, he sees, and he's not really interested in music. He doesn't really get it. And so he says, I do what I do when I feel trapped, because that's how I feel. I feel trapped. I'm in a group of maybe a dozen or 14 people. And so what he does is that he said, I close my inner ears, and I put on my face of pleasant sociability to look like it's okay, like I'm enjoying myself, and just endured this. It was a Baroque concert, or bit of music. So he hears applause, re-engages with the room, because now he realizes it's over, because he kind of closed himself off to it. And so he's applauding as well, politely applauding. And a person next to him leans into him and says, and I wish I could do it with the accent, but I can't, says, so, do you like Bach? And he looks at this person and realizes he's looking into a very famous face, and he looks into the eyes of this person, the famous white hair, the deep-set eyes, the thick German accent. He's sitting next to Albert Einstein, who, by the way, was a famous fan of Bach. If you know, he improvised every night on the piano, and if he got bored with his own improvisations, then he played Bach. And he loved Bach and the intricacies of Bach. So he says, do you like Bach? So Jerome Weidman doesn't want to lie to Albert Einstein. He doesn't want to be honest either about the fact that he doesn't really know anything about Bach. So he says, look, it's not Bach, it's me. I'm tone deaf. I don't understand music. It's too complicated for me. So I'm just not interested in it. And Bach looks and he says, Bach. Einstein looks as if I just said I never took a bath. That's how the look on his face. And Einstein says, you have to come with me. He goes upstairs to a private room, and he says to the guy, who told you were tone deaf? Einstein didn't say it like this. I'm paraphrasing Einstein. But he said, who told you were tone deaf? And Weidman says, it's just always been true. I'm just not good at it. I don't know music, so I'm not good at it, so I don't receive it. I don't understand it. So Einstein says, what's your favorite song? Ugh, I got to come up with a favorite song. So he comes up with a favorite song. It's a Bing Crosby song. What's in the, I can give you the link of how to find the story if you want. It's some Bing Crosby song. Einstein goes through all his albums, finds the song sung by Bing Crosby, puts it on the record player, plays about 30 seconds of it, then says to Weidman, tell me what you just heard. And he thinks, well, the only way for me to tell him what I just heard is to, I guess, sing it back to him, mimic it. So he does, because Einstein said so. He sings it, and he feels awkward, and Einstein beams brilliantly. He says, see, you're not tone deaf. You heard that. Now name another song that you like. So he names another song. He finds it in this amazing collection of records, plays the song. Now tell me what you heard. He sings that back, and he said, it wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. The look on Einstein's face is so elated. He's so excited that this guy is sharing this moment with him. So then Einstein begins to put on more complicated, much deeper, more difficult music. He ends up with Caruso singing some Italian aria and says, sing it back to him. And he tries, and he does, and he says it doesn't sound so bad. And with this, Einstein says, see, it's not that you're not ready for Bach, or that, that Bach is, you don't have a mind that's attuned to Bach. If you sat down to do mathematics in a classroom and you'd never been exposed to mathematics, and they said, do this complicated fraction, and you didn't understand it, you would be so turned off to mathematics. You would think there's something wrong with you, that you can't do the mathematics. But no, you need to do a simple fraction, a simple equation, and then you can build on your skills and get better at it. And now, he says, so you just have to start simple. So they go back down to the concert, and this, of course, Jerome Weibman feels transformed. He's had this moment with the greatest mind in the world, maybe ever, and he also has a new appreciation for himself and for his capacity to actually be in music, which he never thought he could do. And the hostess says to the two of them, I'm so sorry that you missed so much of the performance, because they were upstairs for a while. I have to read this part because I don't want to misrepresent it. So Einstein said, well, we are ready for Bach. He says, just allow yourself to listen, that's all. And it wasn't difficult, Weibman says. Without the effort that Einstein had just poured out for a total stranger, I would never have heard, as I did that night, for the first time in my life, Bach's Sheep May Safely Graze. I have heard it many times since. I don't think I shall ever tire of it, because I never listened to it alone. I am sitting beside a small round man with a shock of untidy white hair, a dead pipe clamped between his teeth, and eyes that contain in their extraordinary warmth all the wonder of the world. And when the concert was finished, I added my genuine applause to that of the others, and that's when the hostess says, I'm so sorry that you missed the rest of the performance. And Einstein says, I'm sorry too, but my young friend here and I, we were engaged in the greatest activity of which man is capable. She said, really? What is that? And he put his arm around Jerome Weibman's shoulders and said, opening up yet another fragment of the frontier of beauty. I feel emotional saying that, so I got to get over myself for a minute here. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Well, most of you guys probably know Einstein's birthday is on Thursday. You know that? Einstein's birthday is Pi Day, 3/14. You will never forget that after today. But I really wanted to talk about Einstein just partly because we're so close to his birthday. And of all the wonders of the world, that his birthday is Pi Day is kind of amazing. So be sure and celebrate with a 3 1/4 inch slice of some kind of pie and read something by Einstein to honor that little wonder of synchronicity in the universe. But there's a lot of things in this story that relate to our topic today. Many, many things. And the first thing I would say is that Einstein was teaching somebody here, of course, about trusting himself and about learning and how this young man learns that he can learn something he didn't even know he was capable of is by someone else listening to him. Because had he sang back a fragment of Bing Crosby's song, and the look on Einstein's face was, well, you could do better than that. Or the look on Einstein's face was, nice try. Well, wouldn't have been a great story. It wouldn't have ended up in most interesting characters in the Reader's Digest, which is how the story came to be about. It's about Einstein listening to him that encouraged him to give a little more. And also about this is a very refined emotional intelligence of recognizing the interaction between people brings things out of us, and then we can give more, and we can pull things out of people that they didn't even know were in them through our own willingness to listen. That doesn't mean we agree. It doesn't always mean we like what we hear. And that's where emotional intelligence and the development of our own, of this intersection of skills comes in. Because emotional intelligence is this cross-section of emotional realities. One is being able to perceive emotions, to label them, to know what we feel so that we can recognize emotional states in other people as well. Understand them, like I know where that's coming from. For example, this young man saying, I'm tone deaf. And as a music therapist, I have to say, I heard that many, many times from people. When I'd walk in with my guitar, oh, dread. No, you're going to make us sing. And within 10 minutes, everybody was having a good time because you can do it. You just get with it, and the spirit kind of takes it, and people go, oh, I can sing. But somebody told them that they couldn't. Somebody tells us things about ourselves. And then we feel that way about ourselves. It's not just singing. It's just many, many things that we believe about ourselves or feel about ourselves that can change, that can be transformed. Using our emotions, to connect, to guide us, to make intuitive judgments. And managing emotions, of course, is very important. That if we feel stress, we feel anger, we feel fear, if we feel overly connected to somebody and feel like we're going to cross a boundary. Just managing emotions doesn't mean that you have to change them. It's knowing what to do with them, what roles are appropriate for how to express emotions and so on. So that intersection of emotional intelligence, it's like a lifetime developmental process, really. You learn some stuff, you get better at it, find out something else we need to grow in some other area, but that makes it interesting. But we call that the words and the music of people, the words and the music of humanity. Because trust and mutual understanding, when you're feeling that, when you know there's a mutual understanding, and when you know that people are what they represent themselves to be, things flow. And developing that with other people, sometimes it's very easy because there's just a great flow of energy between people, and sometimes it takes a lot of conflict resolution and talking, and it's usually a combination of both, that even when people really, really click, there's still a lot of processing that you'll have to do over the course of your relationship. Trust and mutual understanding are these fundamental forces in human interaction, and establishing trust is about listening and receiving what others are expressing. We don't necessarily agree with it, but being able to take it in and not sort of distort it, rewrite it, deny it, all the things that might, if it's uncomfortable, really listening, we'll then maybe be able to deliver some kind of a coherent response to it. Our own emotions are probably the greatest obstacle sometimes to being able to hear, but they can also be sort of the river on which we flow with other people if we understand ourselves. And emotional intelligence is this, as we're doing month after month, a different subset of developmental issues of our dimensions of being, right? So emotional intelligence is a complex thing. But as an overall course of study of self, it gives us this capacity to appreciate and develop those connections between ourselves and others. Now, this is a study that was done on the psychology of what works. It's a whole book about different styles of coping and studies of coping and what really helps. People that this capacity to be able to perceive, to really hear what other people are saying, to be able to hear the music and the words of another person's communication, to understand it, and to make discerning judgments, that when we're able to, if we focus on that as an area of development, there's some very good side benefits that come with that. The ability to respond flexibly to changes and to build supportive networks. Now, as you all know, because you're working on teams and in departments with just a whole variety of people, and being able to really hear people for who they really are and being able to respond to people that may be quite different from ourselves is a very important skill, 21st century skill for sure, working with people that you don't even meet in person sometimes and being able to really hear them. So that alone as a skill development has a lot of side benefits to the development of relationships. Now, they've done an awful lot of studies on communication skills and listening in the medical world, and that's where a lot of these studies have come from in the business world, but the medical world is pretty critical, that mistakes in the operating room, for example, are greatly reduced when surgeons are trained in listening, because they often, historically, surgeons being the top dog on the team would not be that surgical nurses and aides and even anesthesiologists sometimes would not be willing to speak up because they would be dismissed. It just wasn't the order of things. And so mistakes would be made because nobody could speak up to the surgeon, and if they did speak up to the surgeon didn't respond or did not take them seriously. So they took that from crew resource management in the aviation world and put that into the medical world, and medical mistakes went down dramatically. So this is a sad little cartoon, but it's also an important one, that people listening to each other, things get done. And of course, the studies also show greater cohesion among team or group members, greater productivity with fewer mistakes, and of course, the sharing of information, and that leads to more creative and innovative work. Listening, as we know, when you think about the fact that listening never shuts down, you should close your eyes to go to sleep, and you might miss a scent in your house. There are a lot of things you might sleep through, but noises wake people up. Our hearing is so attuned to unexpected, to sound in general. It never, unless you're hearing impaired, that's a different situation altogether. But if your hearing is not impaired, it never shuts down. So we hear things in our sleep, we hear things going on in the house, and it's a survival response as well. And hearing and listening is also more than just that automatic response of what's going on when we're not fully conscious. It's also a real, true, full connection to another person if we're actually, focusing our attention on them. And that's what the next bit is about. It's not something that just happens. It's actually a choice. Like the playwright at the party said, he literally said, I closed my inner ear. So I could just have a good time without being bothered by this stimuli that I don't really care for, but have that look of feigned interest that we all know what that's like. I'm just going to tolerate this conversation and look pleasantly entertained and think about something else. Now, this is from the International Listening Association, which has on that website resources, research. There's a conference that they do annually. There's a journal related to listening. This is a big topic. It's a very important topic. And so their definition of listening, the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken and or verbal messages. Now, here's the thing. Now, as a therapist, I was kind of intrigued or entertained by this. If you say something and no one heard it, what's the way? If a tree falls, how does that one go? No. If a tree falls and there's no one there to hear it, did it make a sound, right? So if you say something and no one took it in, did it make a sound? Does it matter? And I don't know, a few times people have been, had a therapist kind of zoning out on them, and then that's probably the greatest, most painful thing you can imagine is the therapist saying, I've had enough, all you do is talk about yourself. But here's the thing, if somebody isn't listening, in a way, did it really happen? Did that interaction happen? This happens in informal things all the time with people. You say, I told you we were meeting at noon, and the other person said, no, I thought you canceled. And you say, no, I told you we were meeting at noon, and two people heard completely different things. That happens all the time. And so being able to do what Einstein did, which is to say, tell me what you heard, when we're really dealing with something important, when you're really dealing with relationships, or even as a habit with people, to be able to say, this is what I heard. and find out, check it out with people. This is what I heard, because sometimes if it wasn't heard, it didn't really happen. We leave with a different impression of what happened in that interaction. And there are some very simple things that help to kind of eliminate what can be massive misunderstandings, and some of them are checking in that way. Did I hear what you, this is what I heard you say, is that what you meant to say? And clarify. This is a wonderful author, Brenda Ueland. Listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. The friends who listen to us are the ones whom we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. So like that tree falling in the forest, if nobody hears what we really say, it's as if it's just lost in the void. And so in relationships, to develop emotional intelligence, just as a practice, it's a very good thing to let people know what you heard. And it brings something out of people to let them know that what they said was meaningful, that it landed on you. And also to check in with other people. This is, what did you hear me say? Especially true for parenting. teams or leadership. Things can get very easily misconstrued, and we'll in a minute get into some of the reasons that things get misconstrued for entirely human reasons, not because people are meaning to screw it up or be disrespectful, for very human reasons because of what's going on with us internally. But communication and these kind of interpersonal skills form the foundation of an emotionally intelligent team, an emotionally intelligent family or relationship. There's a richness to that just kind of can't be denied once you experience it. So listening is about attention to the words and the music of other people and our interactions with them. So ladies, I'm sure everyone here has met the guy that said, well, I've never met anyone like you. I can really talk to you. Like, you are really special. And you like, it's great. No, I'll get to the guy in a minute. Okay, gentlemen, you've all dated a woman that said, you're amazing, you're the greatest thing, I never met anybody like you. You're right, but I wasn't going to leave you out, but let's just weave it all in together. When you date somebody who says these things about you're amazing, those words can feel so good that we don't even hear the music, which is the behavior of the person, the general attitude of the person, what's the life they're really living. It can feel so good that we don't even notice some other realities about that person. And the words, we need to have the words and the music match for a relationship to hold up. I was going to use a different example for the guys, but that's okay. You caught me. Yeah. What was that? My body language and my emotional, okay. No. But people can be, extremely flattering and not mean it, and we don't, it's being able, sometimes you have to know somebody well enough to know whether that's true, but emotional intelligence, if you're hiring people, if you've ever experienced this, where you hire somebody, have them come for 2 or 3 interviews, have them meet the staff. This happened to me when I was running an agency, and the person that showed up for work, and we were so sure about this person. The person that showed up for work was a completely different person than the person that showed up for the interviews. And that was shocking, because we thought we vetted this person quite well. And she didn't last very long. But I mean, sometimes it can take time to really listen to the words and the music of an interaction. But you get it when somebody says, no, everything's fine, it's really fine. And if you don't feel like it's fine, what do? You can at least know, even if they won't open up, even if somebody said they're just not going to tell you, at least file it away. It wasn't fine. Because if we go forward, because the music is saying, this doesn't add up, this isn't right, this is a Bach invention with kind of a Sondheim lyric. They don't go. That doesn't match. And if they don't match, it doesn't mean you have to fix it. It doesn't mean really to do anything, but to be aware. So we don't trip over that. Attention is an integration of mental, physical, and emotional processes. And music may be the best example of that as well. When we focus our attention, music focuses our attention on a lyric, on an energy, on a beat. And even when we worked with hearing impaired kids using music, there was the kids hearing impaired kids responded very well to rhythm. Our brains are organized around rhythm, and it was an immediate response to drums, and very, very loud in there, obviously. And the organizing of attention through music, or through rhythms, through music, through lyrics, and through melody, is very powerful to our brains because it goes directly to the emotional centers of the brain, the limbic system of the brain, and then the reticular formation, which takes those emotional responses into all parts of the rest of us, into your thinking mind, into our body, our cerebellum, where our blood pressure rate, everything is responding to all of that integration of sound. Well, we don't necessarily think about music when we're with other people in a meeting, but even the tone of someone's voice is a kind of music. And the energy of a person and the eye contact that they make, a closed-in, energy, a closed-in body language, or a very open body language gives a different music, a different kind of sense of it. And your brain picks up on that in a nonverbal way. The metaphorical part of your brain, the musical part of your brain picks up on that and responds to it. And we are kind of trained, unfortunately, by structured schooling, to ignore some of that, to ignore some of what you're put in a classroom with kids when you're growing up and with a teacher that may or may not know what they're doing. They could be brilliant, they could be so-so. You're not supposed to judge them. You're not supposed to really perceive what may be going on there that isn't right or isn't fair. You're not really supposed to know that. And of course, depending on how much your parents stood up for the teacher. My teachers were nuns, so I didn't have a chance. I didn't have a chance. But some parents would go to the bat for their kids, say, then this nun is crazy. But no, for the most part, no, that would not be tolerated. So you sort of train yourself not to notice those things that you can't do anything about. And I think that we do that in many ways because it's survival. It's like this playwright just shutting down the things like, I don't know what to do anyway, so I just won't notice it. As adults in the real world, and especially now, the way the world is so complex, we are well served by retraining ourselves to notice all those nuances of people so that we know what's going on. It doesn't mean you can fix it. It doesn't mean you can necessarily change it. But if there is something you need to understand about someone else, we won't ignore it. We won't just look the other way. So when we can direct and sustain attention, that's really what listening is about. And we're going to get into a little bit about how you do that. So there's types of attention. They got this through neuroscience, of course, and through the science of listening, the science of hearing. There's the simple or the startle kind of hearing. If there's a loud noise, something that wakes you up from sleep, that's called the startle kind of hearing, and it's a very, very functional, survival, automatic response. That kind of hearing doesn't require your prefrontal cortex. That comes later. Your thinking mind comes later. Stimulus-directed listening, that's when something seems specifically for us. Like, every time I hear that song, I think of my first boyfriend, or you hear your name called across the room, or the sound of a cardinal makes you think of someone that taught you a bird call or something like that. So that's kind of, that's stimulus-directed, like the sound then focuses our mind. The more refined kind of listening that we're talking about today in specific is, well, this is like bottom-up listening, where the lower parts of your brain, the more reactive, responsive, automatic parts of your brain are operating. Even though with stimulus-directed, it has to do with memory and thought. The top-down kind of listening is, I choose to focus on this. And I train my mind to focus on it. And by doing that, I become better at it. I become more aware, more attuned, and then I'm able to, the more you do it, the more you're able to do it, like any other skill. It's a muscle, a kind of a psychological muscle. So when you actually pay attention to something that you're listening to, whether it's a song or the cat mewing at dinner time, a separate top-down neural pathway comes into play. And here, the signals are conveyed through a dorsal pathway in your cortex, part of the brain that does more computation, which lets you actively focus on what you're hearing and tune out the sights and sounds that aren't as important. That in the state of flow, if you're familiar with the concept of flow, when you're really into an activity, that time kind of, you're not aware of time, you're not really, because you've focused your attention on something that you deeply are engaged with. That kind of listening, or that kind of focus, you can get a lot of work done, and you can really, it helps you so much to hear what you need to hear and what's really going on. The idea is the more you practice that kind of focused listening, the better you are at it, and you can bring it into every situation in which you need it. So listening to the music of a person is listening with empathy, listening to connect with a person's feelings and thoughts. So when someone says, I can't make it, and we're disappointed, we're disappointed that they can't make it, and it can be very hard at that moment to tune in to say, what's going on? Are you okay? To get beyond our own feelings sometimes. And yet, sometimes if you listen to the music of a person, we get so much more out of what they're really trying to tell us. When a team member, for example, is not on the same emotional wavelength as the rest, this is from Harvard Business Review. There's a lot of good articles about listening and storytelling and team building using these skills on Harvard Business Review website, that a team can develop what we call these emotional intelligence skills and create norms for that group that help to break down what may be a communication problem because somebody's off, somebody's in a mood, somebody may have, not want to admit they didn't read the paper that they needed, didn't do the work. They maybe not. There could be something going on with people on the team, and accountability is important, right? So if you can develop on a team these kinds of norms so that there's a system where you can say, look, tell us what's going on, for example. We just want to talk about it because you want to hold each other accountable, and everybody has to be free to be able to talk about what's really going on with them. So that if somebody says, look, hold my calls until I'm willing to listen, we need to find a way in a group to encourage somebody to be more willing to listen. And how do we do that? I think that the story about Einstein is a great model. We help other people be willing to listen on a team by listening and drawing out of them what they're really trying to say. At its core, listening is connecting, and the ability to understand the true spirit of a message as it is intended to be communicated and demonstrate your understanding is paramount in forming connections and leading effectively. So these kind of teams, if you have a team that we would call emotionally intelligent, is characterized by not only the cut and dried business end of what the team is, the work of the team, but the interpersonal connections within the team. How do we get along? How do we feel about each other in a work-appropriate way? Because you're together an awful lot and have to be able to at least be able to talk about it. Even if it's not an emotional closeness, there's a kind of an honesty and authenticity about a connection about the team. So we create some kind of interpersonal understanding. Perspective taking, which is a form of role taking, seeing something from another person's point of view, being able to communicate back to that person, this is what I heard you say, this is my response to that, and then let the other person fill us in. Well, that's not really what I said, or that's exactly what I said, and I feel heard by you, and I'm still not interested in your point. No, people, the thing is, we can do our best. I don't ever want to paint a picture. When I do longer experiential trainings with big groups an awful lot, and it takes a lot of work. This is an overview of something that takes a lot of practice. And yet, even if there isn't time in your day, say, to just sit as a group and work on some of these things, the more we do on our own, honestly, the more you bring to the interaction some of that degree of emotional intelligence, the richer that group is going to be, at least for you. You'll be able to hear and see what's going on and not take things personally, maybe, that are going on that you've done your best to communicate. or express yourself or to hear other people openly. We can't really control what other people are going to do in terms of their own growth or their development. And yet, everything that we do brings something unexpected to that moment. That's why I like the story, Einstein's story, because this young man was being polite at this party. He wasn't going to hurt anybody. He wasn't going to listen either. And something, reached into that for him, a very important person, but still, somebody took time with him and pulled something out of him he didn't know was in there. And we never know, when we might be able to do that on a team, especially if we see people regularly. So being able to take the perspective of another person is powerful because then we can express some empathy. And empathy is always a powerful connector, especially if we then want to say, so, but still, you need to get your act together. I mean, you can express empathy and still tell people what you need from them. But it's a more powerful way to connect with them than the sort of the intellect first. It's an emotional connection. Of course, confrontation, follows perspective taking / empathy. Sometimes you have to, an emotionally intelligent group is not going to avoid what has to be talked about. It's the spirit of it. It's the music of what's that confrontation is about. Because if you bring a confrontation to somebody in the spirit of combat or in the spirit of, it's a win-lose, or in the spirit of I'm right and you're wrong, that might even be true. It just might not go very well, and the other person might not hear us at all. If we bring the music to the confrontation, if we bring the music of this is getting in the way of our work, this is getting in the way of our time together, if it's an interpersonal relationship, a friendship, or a family, it's really important to say, I'm having a huge resentment towards you right now, and I don't want that. I do not want to feel that towards you. I love you, but I'm really angry with you. But the idea being, I want to get that out of the way, and the only way I know how to do that is to tell you what's bothering me, and can you hear that from me? But by bringing this in the spirit of a confrontation, the purpose of it, bringing that up front. This is not to attack. This is not to hurt you, to injure you, to put you down. This is to say we're at odds, and we are at cross purposes, and I don't want that. What I want is for us to be on the same team, and I really need you to hear me. And in my experience, and I did not grow up learning how to do this. I learned this all after the fact because my family just didn't talk about, my family just put on the happy face is what we did, and prayed about everything and said, Jesus will explain it to you someday if you don't understand. And being a Midwestern person, if anybody else here from the Midwest, I'm telling you, there's a thing in the Midwest about just don't bother anyone. Just don't ever say you don't understand, because it might hurt someone's feelings. There's that happy face that people put on, and I go home to visit now, and I can't tell what anybody's feeling, because there's all the same nice, Midwest nice kind of face, which I understand, but it took a lot for me to get over that myself, to be able to say the kinds of things I'm saying to you right now. But it works so much better to say, I may feel uncomfortable having to bring this confrontation to this group in a work situation or a family situation, and yet I must, because it's getting in the way of goodwill. It's getting in the way of what we could create together. And when you use those words, and if they're interested at all in there being goodwill and being able to create something together, there's a much better chance they'll be able to hear what it is you have to confront them about. I don't even like that word, but the study used it, so I'm using it. We have to do it. It's my Midwest nice that I don't like the word. It's a good word. Perfectly fine word. And of course, doing it with caring. But the idea being, what is the music? What's the energy behind it? You can feel it if you're getting a performance review and you feel like this person's out to get you. You feel like there's somebody, they're gunning for you. You feel it. But if you feel like somebody's wanting to point out things to make you grow, and they see lots of, wonderful things, but they want to point out things to make you grow, it feels different. And this is what emotional intelligence is saying. It's like, recognize that feeling, follow that feeling, want to grow that feeling. It's not something to be ignored or marginalized. Next, okay. So they did a study on how music altered visual perception. Listening to music, for example, well, here's what the study said. That One, music, of course, directly, as I said, directly affects emotions. Immediately, it affects emotions. We know that it evokes emotions, and if you play music, you're expressing emotions and you're feeling emotions. And the listening to music brings up images and metaphors and memories about your life, about your own story. So we can actually influence our own mood by what music we listen to. Now, this study, they asked subjects to retell a brief story that they had to memorize. And the participants that described themselves as being in a negative mood remembered the details of the story. The participants that that described themselves as being sort of an optimistic, sort of upbeat mood, they remembered the gist of the story, the gestalt of the story. Well, it's not that one is right or one is wrong, but it's that our mood does influence what we tend to notice. So whatever we can do to improve our mood, we may expand what it is we notice. So I guess one meaning of that study would be if you want to notice details, get yourself in a really grumpy mood and you'll notice all the details. Yeah, side effects. But okay, so perception is influenced by the emotional state of the observer. Going back to a performance review, for example, we're hearing somebody say where areas that we need to improve, and if our emotional state is that I'm not feeling so great about myself, that other person could have the highest opinion of us, but that's not how it sounds. That we could hear it as a criticism, we could hear it as a hurt, and it could go back to hurt and criticism going back to childhood. That's where our own self-awareness comes in. It does that our own mood and our own story affects our perception. So how we perceive the world depends not only on what we know of the world, but also of what we feel. So we could say, well, I know this supervisor really is a good guy and thinks the world of me, but I don't like what he just said, and then work it through, because that's what the emotional intelligence process would be to say, why? Why does this bother me so much? I can't hear one negative thing about myself, or I can't hear one area of improvement. There were 9 good things, and I only heard the one that was troubling, and work that through. But this study said, oh no, there's another slide about that. But our capacity to learn and to listen and to take in what other people are sharing is profoundly impacted by our emotional state. So they did a study on doing social emotional learning with children to see whether social and emotional process, like helping kids learn to recognize their anxiety, to recognize their positive feelings and where they felt accepted and integrated with others, where they felt good about themselves, where they felt fearful, to recognize, label, and work through their feelings, that when they taught kids this, that they saw changes in the prefrontal cortex. They actually could see changes in neural development. So when all learning is happening all the time, we're always learning intellectual learning, psychological learning, social learning, and physical, or also learning physical learning. We're not learning all those things at the same rate, but they're always going on. So you can lead with something and be really smart in school and maybe not doing so well socially, or vice versa. What they want to do is try to bring that all around, and what they see is that learning is enhanced when the social and emotional piece is in place. That's true for adults too, but it's great to see that they can get at kids when they're still developing, so that they get a set point of a receptivity and of self-knowledge. So here are some ideas for active listening that integrates what we call our recognizing awareness and management of our own emotional life. Well, one is using all available senses to take in the verbal and nonverbal expression of others. So when someone says, "You are," when some woman says, "You are the greatest thing I've ever met," to take in the whole gestalt of that experience over time, and whether those words are the truth of those words, or somebody goes, "No, I'm fine, really, I'm fine," even though there may be nothing you can do about it. We don't forget. They're not fine. There's something going on. Paraphrasing what is heard to check understanding and ensure accurate perceptions. Like Einstein played the music and said, "What did you hear?" And the guy sang it back to him. And even though that version of singing it back to him might not have sounded anything like Bing Crosby, Einstein said, "Yes, I received that. I get this. You heard it." And that's, now you can do more. So when we paraphrase, for example, someone, well, you know what paraphrasing is. I don't have to explain what paraphrasing is, but I was going to give an example. But just to make sure that you give, that what you heard is what was said. So, yeah, I can't think of a good example of paraphrasing. Oh, wait, so I'm not going to go back. And then providing feedback through verbal and nonverbal responses to the speaker and the speaker's message. Applause is a wonderful form of feedback, but I mean, when when it's a public thing. But yeah, nodding. I get it. Openness. I hear you. Or I don't get it. I mean, whatever the truth is, if you don't get it, we say, I did not get that. My husband had a hearing problem last year. He had an infection and he really couldn't hear. And he didn't want me to know that he couldn't hear because he felt like it made him old. And he felt old that he couldn't hear. And he didn't know that it was because he had an infection. He really just thought he was losing his hearing. And I was so aggravated with him because he really truly didn't hear me. And so he would misunderstand many things and not tell me that he didn't hear it because it made him feel old. So all of this was going on for maybe a month. And we were just always missing each other. We were just not getting, we'd be in the house and I would say something and I would say it 3 times and he didn't respond. So I'd say, why are you mad at me? What did I do? Why are you mad at me? And he'd say, I'm not mad at you. And I'd say, but I just said something 3 times. He said, no, you didn't. Well, okay, so here we go. Here we go. He didn't hear it. So we finally, he told me this, he was really upset about it, and he told me about the hearing thing, and we go to the doctor, and he gets treated, and the doctor said, it's going to take a while, it's an infection, we're going to treat it, and it probably will come back, hopefully, your hearing will return. He was very emotional about this, because he felt like he really did never go through something like this before, so we created a code, and this is why I'm telling you this story. We created a code, because I didn't want him to go through the whole humiliation and the feeling of the emotional thing that he was going through about feeling old when he didn't understand what I said because my head was turned. So once I said to him, who's driving? And he said, Smite's Blyven. I said, who's driving? And he goes, Smite's Blyven. Who's Smite's Blyven? And I laughed. I just thought, I said, Smite's Blyven. So that became our code. If he didn't understand what I said, he'd just say, Smite's Blyven. And we still do that. If we don't understand what the other person said, I say, you just Smite's Blyven me. And we have this code. So that's the kind of thing I'm saying is that there was a whole emotional, his hearing is fine, by the way. It took about a year, but it's totally back. But his emotional state made it so much harder for him to process what he did hear, to admit that he only heard a piece of it. And so we had epic misunderstandings that weren't about anybody doing anything wrong. But it was more the emotional reality because he didn't really want to go to the doctor and be told that he had hearing loss. And these emotional things impact the way we perceive other people. So he would sort of see me as impatient and irritable because I was having to repeat myself and not knowing why. It helps a lot to have that kind of, once the communication gets cleared up. So it was help if I would paraphrase and say, Smite's Blyven became our paraphrasing. I don't know what you just said. I have no idea what you just said. So when you paraphrase, you're just restating what the person has said in your own words, and you want to focus on this interaction, and we don't want to bring in the whole kitchen sink. You're telling me that you can't make it on Sunday, like you never make it on Sunday. No, we don't add in that whole, subtext that might be in there. That's for another time. That's for another day. Yes. So we express interest and comprehension. I see, I get it. Smite's Blyven. I have no idea what you just said. We also say it like Jerry Lewis. We made it a lot. Jerry Lewis, Smite's Blyven. That makes it even more epic that we don't understand what the person said. But it actually made the whole thing a lot more fun to deal with. And of course, identify areas of agreement or common experience. This is especially when you're having what we call a confrontation. It's to identify, well, this is where everything's cool. We're good with these things. I always understand you when we talk about this, or you haven't disappointed me in this area. We're talking about this one thing. And most importantly, and maybe sometimes the most difficult, is to set judgments aside, to take in what the other person is saying. Having just been through an election, You know, I know my family is a very, very political family and very divided. And so there's almost no common ground, really, among the passionate people. And then everybody else just stays out of it. They just have, you know, selective deafness just to not be involved. And it takes a lot of emotional intelligence, in my view, to disagree without being disagreeable. You know, to say, I respect your right to have your views, and I even respect some of your views, and this is where I differ. To do that with respect for the humanity of the other person. That's the best thing that can happen. It takes a lot of work. We want to, and if you can do that, if we can slow down our emotional responses, we can allow the other person a complete hearing, literally hearing, like literally hear them out. And take it in, and then, you know, respond the way you want to respond, but to give the person the respect of a complete hearing. In this wonderful article, if you have a chance, all these resources are online, you can look them up, The Science and Art of Listening. This guy wrote a book about music and the auditory process and the importance of listening to our lives. And also points out that in our age of distraction, where there are so many things coming at us, that we're in danger of losing that skill of focusing our attention purposely, mindfully, focusing our attention. But we don't have to. There's tremendous resources and information out there to use to train our attention. Some of them we can do when you're doing other things. But I really like this music reference. The richness of life doesn't lie in the loudness and the beat, but in the timbres and the variations that you can discern if you simply pay attention to all the different rhythms of life and other people and what's going on. And he recommends specifically things to train your attention, to listen to new music rather than music that you already know. So that's something, you know, just try on some artists that you haven't tried before. Listen to your dog's whines and barks and try to interpret what or like you hear a baby's cries. There are there's the hunger cry, the lonely cry, the I don't want to cry, you know, the different kinds of cries. This is the music of a person. Listen to your significant other's voice. Not only to the words that you hear over and over again, but to the sounds under them and the emotions carried in the harmonics and the tone of a person's voice and the emotions that they carry. So these 4 creative practices really, really focus the attention, and there's a tremendous transfer of skill from if you practice any of these kinds of, if you can get involved in any of these, well, metaphors isn't a practice, but it's something to think about when you're communicating with other people. That strengthen emotional intelligence and communication skills, and they're kind of fun to do all along. So one, stilling the mind through mindfulness, and mindfulness-based stress reduction is an evidence-based model. They've done tremendous studies at Harvard, Mind-Body Institute, on changes in the brain from regular mindfulness practice over time. Like over a month's time, they literally see changes in your brain, structures of your brain, and your brainwave activity. And it involves stilling the mind and being very focused in the present moment. So, of course, the dog is saying, you know, how hard it is for a dog to stay. That's true for meditators, too. It's hard to stay in the moment. It's hard to stop your mind from reeling out into all different worries and thoughts. So that practice, it can be, it's a core listening skill because the training is to focus on the one thing. So you could focus on the breath, the sound of your breath, slowing down your breath, your heartbeat, telling your heartbeat to slow down, listening to your heartbeat. Like doing that for 5 minutes. That can be a long 5 minutes. It's like a dog to stay for 5 minutes. For our mental capacities to slow down. But that cultivating of attention has tremendous health benefits and also has great benefits to the development of being able to listen to other people. Slowing down your breathing. You can also, if you're more of a visual person, the flame of a candle, to focus on the flame of a candle for 5 minutes, just looking at the flame of the candle. When your mind goes off to something else, just say the flame of the candle, the flame of the candle. But these, or it can be a yo-yo, it could be anything. I mean, those are 2 that they use typically for meditation. But mindfulness-based stress reduction is also about body awareness and just following your breath and following the awareness of your body and being fully present with yourself. And to do that for 5 to 10 minutes a day, it's just a gift to give yourself. And you can just do it on a lunch break. To reduce, this is a magazine called Mindful that's all about mindfulness, very interesting. So they recommend here, if people really irritate you, go with it. It's like an improv technique. Instead of avoiding it and contracting from gossip or things that irritate you, go into it. Like, be intensely curious about it. Why would you think that? That is fascinating. And just be interested. Like, force yourself to go, what would make somebody think something like that? And ask a lot of questions. That's just a different mindset that at least you're doing something creative, with what's coming in. And you're engaging with it. And the idea being possibly it might silence judgment because you're in the sort of a creative mode. You may be able to connect with them on something that they have to say. It's definitely a more creative place to come from than contraction. And then this is just a simple thing. Listen fully to a long piece of music without a break. Just listen to it. This trains your attention. It just trains your attention to listen, to be patient, to not jump ahead. It's a simple practice. And it works. Music and mood are closely interrelated, so this study actually shared that or discovered that when the kind of music that you listen to influences your mood. So if you do feel down, listen to music that's a totally subjective choice, what music is going to lift your spirits, or it can be music that really matches what you feel and it just feels better to hear, Janis Ian versus James Taylor, or those are my people, but, or Joni Mitchell, could be melancholy but make you feel like understood, by the world. And I got to tell you, working in psychiatry, people who were, I would have in a group people who were hallucinating, people who were manic, people like you and me that were just very, very, very depressed or traumatized in the same group because I never knew who was going to be in there day to day. And the one thing that we unite these people was the Beatles. Because I had this book of Beatles songs, and there's a Beatles song for everything. It's a Beatles song for every mood and feeling and thought. And so we would find everybody could relate to that. It was just our time in this age. So this unifying thing of music would get people to connect with each other and listen to each other and improve our mood. So you can do that for yourself. And of course, stories. Stories are a way to weave metaphor, to weave details into a coherent narrative that then tends to remain with a listener in a way because it's tightly knit, it's integrated. And so the idea being, there's a lot of studies about storytelling, and when a listener is fully engaged, that the brain activity of the listener and the teller, they call it neural coupling, are synced. And not in this one. This one. This study, speaker-listener neural coupling. And so from this, many other studies are happening about what's happening when people are listening. But also, as people who, if you want to share information or you want to talk to somebody and get them to listen, the idea that they're saying is use stories because people you'll be able to get your message across to somebody in a way that they're more likely to remember. So the recording, so the speaker brain and the listener brain opens a new window into the neural basis of interpersonal communication. And they're looking at ways to assess verbal and nonverbal communication and the use of metaphor. When the brain hears the same metaphors over and over again, like if you say, oh, piece of cake, or, what's another metaphor? Like an old metaphor that you've heard many, many times, it doesn't light up those parts of the brain that when you hear a new version of a metaphor, a new one. So if that's the idea, if we work a little harder at coming up with a metaphor, people are more likely to really grab it. So the writers work hard at that. 21's out the window, and then they find the one that really clicks. I do want to end on something that I think is just to end on how we began, but think of listening as the quality control of communications. If we take full responsibility for ourselves in relationships and we say, if I didn't understand that, like when my husband had the hearing thing, I have to say, what am I doing? What am I doing? How am I, what's my part in this? Because that's the only part that I can control, is how am I responding and how am I communicating? And listening with purpose, even if it's to things that we don't, like if you're going to go to a concert and you don't think it's your kind of music, or you have to go to a meeting and you think it'll be dry, there's choices about how we're going to direct our attention, and that's a creative choice. And that purposeness can be driven by curiosity. What can I notice that I wouldn't have noticed had I not thought ahead, to how I'm going, oh, this person really annoys me, wow. Oh my God, I can't stand it, I wish she'd shut up. And you could be thinking that, and you can also say, so what is it about this? Who does she remind me of? It could be, some kind of, or what else is going on in the room, or how are the other people seem to be, just to focus our attention in a purposeful, curious way is the idea. And so we end with Mr. Einstein, who said, I have no particular talent, I am only passionately curious. And so he was a humble guy, I think. I've read many, many, many books about him and many quotes of things that he said. And if anything, he believed in humanity. He believed in the more we encourage our own humanity and each other's humanity, the more likely we're going to be to use technology to a better purpose than a destructive purpose. So that last half of his life was spent on trying to get people to think about our humanity and to listen to each other. And so I leave you with Happy Pi Day, celebrate Pi Day, and thank you for listening.